The house sat like a forgotten relic at the edge of town, its silhouette dark against the dying light of the evening. The wind howled through the trees, their branches twisting and creaking like ancient fingers reaching toward the sky. The house was old, older than the town itself, and it carried with it a weight, a heavy feeling that made even the bravest souls uneasy. Inside the house, little Lily played by herself. Her parents, worn thin by work, paid little attention to the way her giggles echoed strangely through the rooms, or how she would sometimes sit for hours, staring out of the window, speaking softly to someone who wasn't there. At first they thought nothing of it, an imaginary friend. Every child had one. But it wasn't long before they noticed the oddity in her stories. The friend she spoke of wasn't like the usual make-believe companions. This one had a face, a pale, almost featureless face, with dark, cold eyes. He had a tall, shadowy figure, as if he were more of a presence than a person, and the closer they looked, the more he seemed. They tried to dismiss the uneasy feeling that gnawed at them, but as the days passed, the presence in the house grew stronger. Late at night, they would hear the floorboards creak, the soft whisper of footsteps in the hall, always just out of sight. At first it was just an occasional chill in the air, a fleeting glimpse of something moving in the corner of their vision, but soon it became impossible to ignore. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. One evening, after an exhausting day, the parents returned home to find Lily in the living room. She wasn't playing, she wasn't talking. She was sitting motionless, staring at the door, as if waiting for someone to arrive, and there was a presence. An oppressive, suffocating presence. The room felt colder, and for a moment neither of them could breathe. They glanced at each other, an unspoken fear crawling up their spines. Something was wrong, so horribly wrong. They turned to their daughter, who smiled at them with an unsettling, knowing grin. But this wasn't the innocent smile of a child. It was a smile far too knowing, far too old. Her parents froze, the air thickening around them. It wasn't just the house. It wasn't just the toys scattered across the floor. It wasn't just the shadowy figure that seemed to twitch in the corner of their vision. It was her. Lily wasn't anymore. Her eyes were dark, too dark, empty, as if there was nothing behind them but a void. The figure had fully taken her now. The thing that had watched them, unseen from the shadows, was no longer an imaginary friend. It was something real, something ancient, and it was hungry. Fear gripped them as they backed away slowly, but the figure didn't move. Not yet. It was them. Without thinking, they grabbed Lily, her body cold, stiff as if made of stone, and ran to the car, slamming the door behind them. The engine roared to life, and they sped off down the road, leaving the house behind. But the darkness followed, slipping through the cracks of the windows like a creeping fog. As they drove, the road stretched out before them, winding and endless. But something was wrong. Lily's small form sat silently in the back seat, her eyes now completely black, her fingers twitching with unnatural precision. The car felt colder, the shadows inside growing longer, thicker, swallowing the light. The parents couldn't bring themselves to look at her, but the air was thick with an unspeakable dread. They could feel it. The thing that wasn't their daughter was with them now, and it wasn't just in the back seat. It was in the very car, in the air, filling every inch of space with its suffocating, demonic presence. And then, from the back seat came a breath, a low, unsettling sound, as if the thing was feeding off their fear. The hairs on the back of their necks stood on end. They glanced in the rearview mirror, and in that split second they saw it. Leaning forward, the shadows of its form blurring into something horrific. The mother's breath caught in her throat. Her husband slammed his foot on the gas, desperate to get away, but it was pointless. The road seemed endless, stretching on and on. Suddenly, the father swerved the car, jerking it violently to the side as the darkness in the back seat intensified, suffocating, pressing in on them. He could feel the cold breath against the back of his neck, a whisper of something in the air. He couldn't take it anymore. He didn't know how much longer they could survive in the presence of the thing that had stolen their daughter. There was no place far enough, no place safe enough. In that moment he made a decision. With trembling hands, he slammed his foot down on the brake and the gas at the same time, forcing the car into a sudden, violent swerve. The tires screamed against the road as the car careened off the highway and crashed head-on into a tree with an ear-splitting crunch. For a long moment there was only silence. The trees outside swayed in the wind. The wreckage of the car lay still. And then the father's vision was blurry. His body ached from the impact, but he barely noticed. His eyes drifted to the back seat. Lily was still there, but she wasn't moving. At first he thought it was over. He thought they were safe. The demon, the thing that had taken his daughter, was gone. But then the shadow shifted. It was no longer Lily, but something else. Something far worse. The thing was free. The body was just a vessel, a broken, empty shell now. The black eyes of the demon flashed in the wreckage. It was smiling now, a grotesque, twisted grin spreading across the unnatural face. And then the air thickened once again. The oppressive weight returned, more suffocating than ever. The father tried to move, to scream, but his body wouldn't obey. His wife, bloodied and motionless, was beside him, but she too was silent, lost. And then the darkness engulfed them completely. The demon was free. It didn't matter that they had tried to run. It didn't matter that they had tried to escape. The road had ended. The tree had stopped them. But the demon was eternal. It wasn't bound to a place. It wasn't bound to time. With a low, guttural laugh that echoed through the night, the demon rose, its power growing, now fully unleashed. And in that silence, the road ahead would stretch on forever. A new cycle had begun.